Hey class, it's group 7, last but not least. My name is Nate Williams. My partners are Jordan Warner and Devin Drinkwater, and today we're going to be talking about urbanization. We're going to be looking at two films in particular, one documentary called Urbanized, which came out in 2011, and another one called Journey to Planet Earth, which is a PBS documentary series. And we're going to look at their second episode that focuses on urban explosion. And our presentation is called The Concrete Jungle. Urbanized is a documentary that came out in October 29, 2011. Its director is Gary Huswit, who dubbed Urbanized as the third of his three-part series on design, known as the Design Trilogy. The first being Hellucitica, about the typeface and structures of cities. The second being Objectified, about the industrial design and layouts of cities. And lastly, bringing it all together, the documentary we're going to talk about today, Urbanized, that brings together the strategies and issues involving urban design and its ramifications on culture. And some of the locations that we're going to be talking about today include St. Louis, Phoenix, Beijing, London, New Orleans, Bogota, Mumbai, Rio de Janeiro, New York City, Paris, Copenhagen, Denmark, and many more. In the movie Urbanized, there are many forces that contribute to urbanization, which include economic, social, and environmental forces. Economic, dealing with the money side; social, dealing with the interactions among people in the city; and environmental, dealing with the interactions between the environment and the city itself. The rate of urbanization puts strain and pressure on many different resources available, which is a main key component in the film. Just think, for instance, of Thanksgiving gathering with your extended family, and Grandma makes her world-famous pie, and she only makes one, and you have tons of people that want a bite. And your competition to get pie is very fierce, because she only makes it once a year, and everyone craves it. And this draws very close similarity between people and their struggle to fight for resources that are needed for human life. In barbaric terms, it's almost as if it's survival of the fittest. Because these small, dense areas of population are so heavily competitive for these resources, it draws a huge gap between the people that can obtain these resources and the people that can't obtain these resources. Another topic that light is shed upon is in the industrialization era in the 1800s. The industrialization era was when America was first starting out, and they were able to take machines and start to produce items on a mass production scale, which not only helped them with trade, but also helped them kickstart a young economy in trying to become dominant in the world. Before, items were made by hand and took an extensive period of time to make one item. This caused much effort and much time-consuming practices to make these items. But now, because America can produce on a mass production scale, it would be favorable. It would provide favorable trade, the utmost efficiency, and it created jobs. In the movie, they talk about cities competing for people by five main reasons. Investment, which has to do with people's return on the chance that they take in traveling to the city. How they are developing refers to their progress that they're currently making in trying to become. Developing cities also attract huge crowds and present huge opportunity for those that are in need. Reliability is a huge component that cities try to recruit people, because the more stable a city is, the more people that are going to want to flock to that city. Economic stability is probably the biggest out of these five categories for competition. Economic stability, of course, has to do with, of course, the economic prosperity that city is providing. This is important because in a world where money talks, it is extremely important to have money to be able to afford the quality of life that one wants. Easy to do business in is a huge component, because if it is easy to start a business, to operate a business, and to work in a business, this creates a great environment for those looking for not only opportunity, but for those to increase their wealth. As you can see in the current urbanization chart, the populations in these cities are increasing exponentially. As you can see, first off, in 1900, 2 out of every 10 people lived in an urban area. This was due because at this time, the rural lifestyle appeal was at its highest, because so many had learned how to farm the land and provide for oneself. But as cities popped up, it created an influx and attention for people to start moving in towards areas that could provide a better life for oneself. As you can see, in 2010, 5 out of every 10 people live in an urban area. This is a huge statistic, because now there are 7.3 billion people in the world, and if half of 7.3 billion people live in cities, that is a huge proportion of our population living in these small, dense areas, which creates even more and more harsh competition amongst one another. And as you can see in the graph, it is predicted in 2030 that 6 out of every 10 people, and then in 20 more years later, in 2050, 7 out of every 10 people will live in these urban areas. This will just cause more competition amongst one another, and will cause cities to have to not only cater to a huge amount of people, but also have to adapt to an incredibly amount of people, thus causing cities to even expand. Another main point in the movie Urbanized, cities are trying to revitalize and innovate themselves to accommodate the rapid growth of population. And in the film, they use many specific different cities and how they relate to this issue. Bogota, Colombia is one of them, and they use Transmillennial to help revitalize their traffic congestion problem by using buses that have special lanes and are not affected by the flow of congested traffic, which helps with efficiency of getting people where they need to go in a short amount of time. This results in high productivity, less air pollution, and more cost-efficient city life for those living in the capital of Colombia. A next example is Copenhagen, Denmark, and their interconnection and encouragement of using bicycles. Riding bicycles has always been a main concern with getting hit with cars. But now Copenhagen decided to make a special bike lane that was protected by parked cars on the side to encourage more bike riders, less cars on the street, not only cutting down air pollution once again, but making it more accessible, more social forces amongst one another to encourage interaction between people in the city to create a better social life for those seeking that. Also, its use was to cut down on the inefficiency of having so many cars in a small area. By using bicycles, they are able, just like Colombia with the Transmillennial, they're able to get where they're going at a faster pace. And by using bikes, this also helps with making Copenhagen a hub for better health. And lastly, the example of New York City and their project Highline. In New York City, when it was first originated, they had train tracks that ran above the streets and were more of a bird's eye view of the city. Well, now, because of the 21st century, they decided to build more subways because it would be more efficient, weather would be less permitting, and it would be safer. In doing so, New York neglected these old railroad tracks that were suspended above the streets, and it brought down the city because of its lack of care. But Project Highline decided to reamp and innovate the old railroad tracks into more of a boardwalk that tourists and locals were allowed to see the better unique sightlines of the city, which made for a better experience not only for tourists, but it interconnected the people of New York City in a way that had never been seen before. Because urban population is so rapid, we're starting to see a suburban movement, which was evident in the video with the city Phoenix. The quest for the American dream is one that many Americans seek. The American dream, of course, is the typical big family in a house on a big plot of land in a suburbs where the kids can play and normal daily life is a luxury. Because of the suburban movement, we can see many people not going into the city, now coming out of the city, building more city-like environments, but because of transportation and how it is advanced, we are able to commute to the city to reap the benefits of the city, but still be able to satisfy our own social needs. There are many issues of urbanization, one in which includes slums being created. Slums refer to the areas in which people lack the resources that one needs to live life. This happens because of the highly competitive competition amongst one another in these huge populated cities. In the film, Mumbai is referred to one of the worst slums in the entire world. It is said that 33% of urban dwellers in Mumbai live in slums. This is shockingly because of their high population, which just means that there's a high influx of people that are deprived of basic resources to live. One of the many statistics that is used to determine basic resources for life is families per toilet. This has to do with the sanitation problem that is deprived of many people. And in Mumbai, it currently is 600 families to one toilet, which just emphasizes how incredibly deprived these slums are. These are due to density and overpopulation, which just leads to more competition for resources, like explained earlier, between these small areas of high population, which compete for these limited amount of resources. Another issue in urbanization is pollution. This has three different areas of pollution, which include air, water, and environmental. Air refers to the CO2 emissions and the carbon being released into the atmosphere due to the air pollution has to do with the amount of people and the relationships to machinery. Because machinery is oil and gas operated, it releases CO2 emissions, which contribute to air quality being lessened and air pollution increasing. Water pollution has to do with the contamination of fresh water that is used for drinking. In many cities around the world, that is explained in the movie, it is shown that water levels are extremely toxic because of these large cities just dumping waste into our waterways. Environmental pollution has to do with the destruction of Mother Nature because of how high of a demand the space for living in these cities are. Because the cities can only hold a set amount, cities are forced to expand, which they have to interfere with nature around it. Depletion of resources is another huge issue of urbanization, which piggybacks slums being created. And last but not least, but one of the most important issues of urbanization is the poverty level that it creates for those who can't get the resources that they need. For example, in the movie, Santiago, Chile, uses government housing just like Kiva.org did in one of our activities. The government in Chile is trying to help people get off their feet and kickstarting their lifestyles to be able to start to afford these resources by giving them money to be able to afford housing, and with housing creates more jobs, and it just piggybacks off kickstarting an economy. The significance of urbanization is the movement and how it engages and revitalizes the many areas of life, such as economic opportunity again, innovations, how these cities are adapting to the new needs of these people, and how they provide a better quality of life to these people that are coming in is what these people are looking for. Obviously, there's always a double-edged sword with everything everything out there. Some of the negatives of urbanization again include pollution, non-effective transportation, which leads to more not only air pollution but more congestion, less efficiency, and a city not doing as great as it should be doing. And again, survival of the fittest, just the struggle for resources in these areas.
Next, we're going to be looking at a series done by PBS called Journeys to Planet Earth. This episode was the second episode of Season 1. It was released in 1999, so it's not 100% accurate due to the present time today. Today, more than half the population lives in cities. One of the main issues today is how to sustain the world's population without destroying the environment. The four main cities we're going to talk about is New York City, Shanghai, Istanbul, and Mexico City. Mexico City is home of over 9 million citizens with a growing population of 30,000 each year. September 16th is Mexico's Independence Day, and off the angry citizens march in protest for environmental change. One of the main problems with Mexico City's environment is a closed ecosystem. Mexico City is 1.5 miles above sea level and is surrounded by a mountain wall. In between this mountain wall lays Mexico City, and it lay like in between the valley of these mountains. This enclosed system causes little wind, no ocean, or any major river, so it has no purification of air. The air is so toxic, 8 out of 10 days, the air is so toxic, it is equivalent to smoking 2 packs a day, just standing in the environment. There's a total of 35,000 factories with polluting air, and mainly the main problem is from 3 million cars. Once famous for their rich water fountains, now Mexico City is running out of water. For example, the angel statue resembles Mexico City's independence from Spain, built in 1910. They previously added 23 steps due to the city ground is shrinking. As water gets consumed, the ground loses volume. In total, they lost 30 feet. Compounding the problem are open canals of raw sewage, leaving horrible odors and disease. Eventually, this spills into the Tulo River, where foam and phosphate and deadly bacteria is formed. Further down in the Mezquito Valley, where farmers use half of the sewage water to clean their. Construction crews are now working on an underground sewage plant to treat this sewage before it gets even worse. And only 10% of the wastewater goes to purifying tanks. In between two continents, Istanbul was built in between two continents, Europe and Asia. It once was the capital of the Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman Empire. Istanbul is an ancient city trying to modernize. It once had only 1.5 million people, and now it holds 15 million people. The city is growing so fast, much senior citizens can't find that isn't newly built. People are pouring into the country from cities of poverty. They have over 1,400 new immigrants a day, 43,000 a month, and over 50 million a year. Istanbul forest covers up to 45% of the total surface area. The green space laws is what protects these forests, but people still destroy and put down huge housing projects called Geechee condos. Translation is built overnight. Majority of these Geechee condos, like the picture down here to the right, are mostly cheap, limited living space, and unsanitary. The Bosphorus River was always a huge supply of fish, treating generations of families with fish. Due to the excessive fishing, pollution, and untreated sewage being pumped into the river, this This river is on a fast freefall. Istanbul only treats less than 50% of its wastewater. The rest gets pumped into the Bosphorus River. This problem limits the drinking water and also devalues the water. And also, this river is not that wide. It's only 70 meters wide and it's pretty narrow, but every day it holds about 150 craters of shipping channels and 1,500 fishing boats. Now we're going to go on to Shanghai. This once was a small fishing village and now it is a booming trading center. This city holds over 16 million people. It has over 1,000 multicultural corporations, over 2,000 construction sites. The problems faced in Shanghai is air pollution, water pollution, agricultural structure, and lack of living spaces. Attempting to solve this problem, there are limitations on the amount of cars you can have, a strict air quality laws, and also subway systems to decrease traffic in Shanghai. Water pollution is another major problem in Shanghai, more specifically Soldier Creek. It was an ancient canal used for exporting and importing goods. This creek has now become a sewer and also it's almost like a dumping ground for major companies. On the left here you see there is multiple dead pigs in this river for some reason. But now to the right, Shanghai is working on a sewage system that can resolve this problem. This solution will dramatically reduce the pollutants in the water. Dramatic loss in farmland causes a serious problem for a country that has the highest population on the planet. Industrial expansion has caused the biggest problem for the farmers. Because of the high population, it is hard to generate enough food for everyone. As you can see, there's a serious lack of space going on in Shanghai. Right now you can see there's 4 bunk beds in one room, and this is the typical space of an average person in Shanghai. Because it's a high population and such small places for people to live in, this is the result. And finally, New York City. Out of the 4 cities, New York City was praised the most because they can efficiently maintain their city. It handles all of its waste before it leaves the city, provides clean water, multiple ways of transportation, and most importantly, an abundance of food. But there was one problem with New York. In Harlem, the film informed us that 6 out of 10 bus plants was located in Harlem. These buses run on diesel fuel, which results in high air pollution. Harlem was particularly targeted for environmental injustice due to the people that live there. But overall, as a whole, New York City overall was by far the best city out of the 4.
In conclusion, sometimes there are devastating consequences for uncontrolled growth of cities or communities. Young blossoming cities should use these situations as an example and warning as to what could possibly arise